to the restless gray sea. Rhys drew the sword from his back in a swift movement. "Don't look so surprised," he said. "I've never seen you with a weapon," aside from the dagger he'd grabbed to slit Amarantha's throat at the end, to spare me from agony. Cassian would laugh himself hoarse hearing that, and then make me go into the sparring ring with him. "Can he beat you?" "Hand-to-hand combat? Yes. He'd have to earn it for a change, but he'd win. No arrogance, no pride. Cassian is the best warrior I've encountered in any court, any land. He leads my armies because of it." I didn't doubt his claim. And the other Illyrian? "Azriel, his hands, the scars, I mean," I said. "Where did they come from?" Rhys was quiet a moment. Then he said too softly, "His father had 2 legitimate sons, both older than Azriel, both cruel and spoiled. They learned it from their mother, the Lord's wife. For the 11 years that Azriel lived in his father's keep, she saw to it he was kept in a cell with no window, no light. They let him out for an hour every day, let him see his mother for an hour once a week. He wasn't permitted to train, or fly, or any of the things his Illyrian instincts roared at him to do. When he was 8, his brothers decided it'd be fun to see what happened when you mixed an Illyrian's quick healing gifts with oil and fire. The warriors heard Azriel screaming, but not quick enough to save his hands. Nausea swamped me, but that still left him with 3 more years living with them. What other horrors had he endured before he was sent to that mountain camp? Were his brothers punished? Rhys's face was as unfeeling as the rock and wind and sea around us, as he said with lethal quiet, "Eventually." There was enough rawness in the words that I instead asked, "And Mor, what does she do for you?" "Mor is who I'll call in when the armies fail, and Cassian and Azriel are both dead." My blood chilled. "So she's supposed to wait until then?" "No. As my 3rd, Mor is my court overseer. She looks after the dynamics between the Court of Nightmares and the Court of Dreams, and runs both Valaris and the Hewn City. I suppose in the mortal realm she might be considered a queen." "And Amren?" "Her duties as my 2nd make her my political advisor, walking library, and doer of my dirty work. I appointed her upon gaining my throne, but she was my ally, maybe my friend, long before that." "I mean, in that war, where your armies fail and Cassian and Azriel are dead, and even Mor is gone." Each word was like ice on my tongue. Rhys paused his reach for the bald rock face before us. "If that day comes, I'll find a way to break the spell on Amren and unleash her on the world, and ask her to end me first." By the mother. What is she? After our chat this morning, perhaps it was stupid to ask. Something else. Something worse than us. And if she ever finds a way to shed her prison of flesh and bone, cauldrons save us all. I shivered again and stared up at the sheer stone wall. "I can't climb bare rock like that." "You don't need to," Rhys said, laying a hand flat on the stone. Like a mirage, it vanished in a ripple of light. Pale carved gates stood in its place, so high their tops were lost to the mist. Gates of bone. The bone gates swung open silently, revealing a cavern of black so inky I had never seen its like, even under the mountain. I gripped the amulet at my throat, the metal warm under my palm. Amren got out. I would walk out too. Rhys put a warm hand on my back and guided me inside, 3 balls of moonlight bobbing before us. "No, no, 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 no." "Breathe," he said in my ear. "1 breath." "Where are the guards?" I managed to get out past the tightness in my lungs. "They dwell within the rock of the mountain," he murmured, his hand finding mine and wrapping around it, as he tugged me into the immortal gloom. "They only emerge at feeding time, or to deal with restless prisoners. They are nothing but shadows of thought and an ancient spell." With the small floating lights ahead, I tried not to look too long at the gray walls. especially when they were so rough-hewn that the jagged bits could have been a nose, or a craggy brow, or a set of sneering lips. The dry ground was clear of anything but pebbles, and there was silence, utter silence as we rounded a bend, and the last of the light from the misty world faded into inky black. I focused on my breathing. I couldn't be trapped here. I couldn't be locked in this horrible, dead place. The path plunged deep into the belly of the mountain, and I clutched Rhys's fingers to keep from losing my footing. He still had his sword gripped in his other hand. Do all the High Lords have access? My words were so soft they were devoured by the dark. Even that thrumming power in my veins had vanished, burrowing somewhere in my bones. No. The prison is law unto itself. The island may be even an eighth court, but it falls under my jurisdiction, and my blood is keyed to the gates. Could you free the inmates? No. Once the sentence is given and a prisoner passes those gates, they belong to the prison. It will never let them out. I take sentencing people here very, very seriously. Have you ever? Yes. And now is not the time to speak of it. He squeezed my hand in emphasis. We wound down through the gloom. There were no doors, no lights, no sounds, not even a trickle of water. But I could feel them. I could feel them sleeping, pacing, running hands and claws over the other side of the walls. They were ancient and cruel in a way I had never known, not even with Amarantha. They were infinite and patient and had learned the language of darkness, of stone. How long? I breathed. How long was she in here? I didn't dare say her name. Asriel looked once, into archives in our oldest temples and libraries. All he found was a vague mention that she went in before Prythian was split into the courts, and emerged once they had been established. Her imprisonment predates our written word. I don't know how long she was in here. A few millennia seems a fair guess. Horror roiled in my gut. You never asked? Why bother? She'll tell me when it's necessary. Where did she come from? The brooch he'd given her, such a small gift for a monster who had once dwelled here. I don't know. Though there are legends that claim when the world was born, there were rips in the fabric of the realms, that in the chaos of forming, creatures from other worlds could walk through one of those rips and enter another world. But the rips closed at will, and the creatures could become trapped with no way home. It was more horrifying than I could fathom, both that monsters had walked between worlds and the terror of being trapped in another realm. You think she was one of them? I think that she is the only one of her kind, and there is no record of others ever having existed. Even the Surreal have numbers, however small. But she, and some of those in the prison, I think they came from somewhere else, and they have been looking for a way home for a long, long time. I was shivering beneath the fur-lined leather, my breath clouding in front of me. Down and down we went, and time lost its grip. It could have been hours or days, and we paused only when my useless, wasted body demanded water. Even while I drank, he didn't let go of my hand, as if the rock would swallow me up forever. I made sure those breaks were swift and rare. And still we went onward, deeper. Only the lights and his hand kept me from feeling as if I were about to free fall into darkness. For a heartbeat, the reek of my own dungeon cell cloyed in my nose, and the crunch of moldy hay tickled my cheek. Rhys's hand tightened on my own, just a bit farther. We must be near the bottom by now. Past it. The bone carver is caged beneath the roots of the mountain. Who is he? What is he? I'd only been briefed in what I was to say, nothing of what to expect, no doubt to keep me from panicking too thoroughly. No one knows. He'll appear as he wants to appear. Shapeshifter? Yes and no. He'll appear to you as one thing, and I might be standing right beside you and see another. I tried not to start bleeding like cattle. And the bone carving? You'll see. Rhys stopped before a smooth slab of stone. The hall continued down, down into the ageless dark. The air here was tight, compact. Even my puffs of breath on the chill air seemed short-lived. Rhysand at last released my hand, only to lay his once more on the bare stone. It rippled beneath his palm, forming a door. Like the gates above, it was of ivory, bone, and in its surface were etched countless images, flora and fauna, seas and clouds, stars and moons, infants and skeletons, creatures fair and foul. It swung away. The cell was pitch black, hardly distinguishable from the hall.
"I have carved the doors for every prisoner in this place," said a small voice within, "but my own remains my favorite."
"I'd have to agree," Rhysand said. He stepped inside, the light bobbing ahead to illuminate a dark-haired boy sitting against the far wall, eyes of crushing blue taking in Rhysand, then sliding to where I lurked in the doorway. Rhys reached into a bag I hadn't realized he'd been carrying. No, one he'd summoned from whatever pocket between realms he used for storage. He chucked an object toward the boy, who looked no more than 8. White gleamed as it clacked on the rough stone floor. Another bone, long and sturdy, and jagged on one end. "The calf bone that made the final kill when Feyre slew the Middengard worm," Rhys said. My very blood stilled. There had been many bones that I'd laid in my trap. I hadn't noticed which had ended the worm, or thought anyone would.
"Come inside,"
was all the bone carver said, and there was no innocence, no kindness in that child's voice. I took one step in, and no more.
"It has been an age,"
the boy said, gobbling down the sight of me,
"since something new came into this world."
"Hello," I breathed. The boy's smile was a mockery of innocence.
"Are you frightened?"
"Yes," I said. Never lie. That had been Rhys's first command. The boy stood, but he kept to the other side of the cell.
"Feyre,"
he murmured, cocking his head. The orb of Feylight glazed the inky hair in silver.
"Feyre,"
he said again, drawing out the syllables as if he could taste them. At last, he straightened his head.
"Where did you go when you died?"
"A question for a question," I replied, as I'd been instructed over breakfast. The bone carver inclined his head to Rhysand.
"You were always smarter than your forefathers."
But those eyes alighted on me.
"Tell me where you went, what you saw, and I will answer your question."
Rhys gave me a subtle nod, but his eyes were wary, because what the boy had asked. I had to calm my breathing to think, to remember. But there was blood and death and pain and screaming, and she was breaking me, killing me so slowly, and Rhys was there, roaring in fury as I died, Tamlin begging for my life on his knees before her throne. But there was so much agony, and I wanted it to be over, wanted it all to stop. Rhys had gone rigid while he monitored the bone carver, as if those memories were freely flowing past the mental shields I'd made sure were intact this morning. And I wondered if he thought I'd give up then and there. I bunched my hands into fists. I had lived. I had gotten out. I would get out today. "I heard the crack," I said. Rhys's head whipped toward me. "I heard the crack when she broke my neck. It was in my ears, but also inside my skull. I was gone before I felt anything more than the first lash of pain." The bone carver's violet eyes seemed to glow brighter. And then it was dark, a different sort of dark than this place, but there was a thread, I said, a tether, and I yanked on it, and suddenly I could see. Not through my eyes, but his, I said, inclining my head toward Rhys. I uncurled the fingers of my tattooed hand, and I knew I was dead. And this tiny scrap of spirit was all that was left of me, clinging to the thread of our bargain.
"But was anyone there? Were you seeing anything beyond?"
There was only that bond in the darkness. Rhys's face had gone pale, his mouth a tight line. "And when I was made anew," I said, "I followed that bond back, to me. I knew that home was on the other end of it. There was light, then, like swimming up through sparkling wine.
Were you afraid?
All I wanted was to return to the people around me. I wanted it badly enough I didn't have room for fear. The worst had happened, and the darkness was calm and quiet. It did not seem like a bad thing to fade into. But I wanted to go home, so I followed the bond home.
There was no other world?
The bone carver pushed. If there was or is, I did not see it.
No light? No portal?
Where is it that you want to go? The question almost leaped off my tongue. It was only peace and darkness.
Did you have a body?
No.
Did—
That's enough from you, Rhysand purred, the sound like velvet over sharpest steel. You said a question for a question. Now you've asked. He did a tally on his fingers. 6. The bone carver leaned back against the wall and slid to a sitting position.
It is a rare day when I meet someone who comes back from true death. Forgive me for wanting to peer behind the curtain.
He waved a delicate hand in my direction.
Ask it, girl.
If there was no body, nothing but perhaps a bit of bone, I said as solidly as I could, would there be a way to resurrect that person? To grow them a new body, put their soul into it? Those eyes flashed.
Was the soul somehow preserved? Contained?
I tried not to think about the eye ring Amarantha had worn, the soul she'd trapped inside to witness her every horror and depravity. Yes.
There is no way.
I almost sighed in relief.
Unless—
The boy bounced each finger off his thumb, his hand like some pale, twitchy insect.
Long ago, before the High Fae, before man, there was a cauldron. They say all the magic was contained inside it, that the world was born in it, but it fell into the wrong hands, and great and horrible things were done with it. Things were forged with it, such wicked things that the cauldron was eventually stolen back at great cost. It could not be destroyed, for it had made all things, and if it were broken, then life would cease to be. So it was hidden and forgotten. Only with that cauldron could something that is dead be reforged like that.
Rhysand's face was again a mask of calm. Where did they hide it?
Tell me a secret no one knows, Lord of Night, and I'll tell you mine.
I braced myself for whatever horrible truth was about to come my way, but Rhysand said, My right knee gets a twinge of pain when it rains. I wrecked it during the war, and it's hurt ever since. The bone carver bit out a harsh laugh, even as I gaped at Rhys.
You were always my favorite,
he said, giving a smile I would never for a moment think was childlike.
Very well. The cauldron was hidden at the bottom of a frozen lake in Lapland.
Rhys began to turn for me, as if he'd head there right now, but the bone carver added,
And vanished a long, long time ago.
Rhys halted.
I don't know where it went to, or where it is now. Millennia before you were born, the 3 feet on which it stands were successfully cleaved from its base in an attempt to fracture some of its power. It worked, barely. Removing the feet was like cutting off the first knuckle of a finger. Irksome, but you could still use the rest with some difficulty. The feet were hidden at 3 different temples, Césaire, Sangrava, and Ithaca. If they have gone missing, it is likely the cauldron is active once more, and that the wielder wants it at full power, and not a wisp of it missing.
That was why the temples had been ransacked, to get the feet on which the cauldron stood and restore it to its full power. Rhys merely said, I don't suppose you know who now has the cauldron. The bone carver pointed a small finger at me.
Promise that you'll give me her bones when she dies, and I'll think about it.
I stiffened, but the boy laughed.
No, I don't think even you would promise that, Rhysand.
I might have called the look on Rhys's face a warning. Thank you for your help, he said, placing a hand on my back to guide me out. But if he knew... I turned again to the boy creature. There was a choice in death, I said. those eyes guttered with cobalt fire. Rhys's hand contracted on my back, but remained, warm, steady, and I wondered if the touch was more to reassure him that I was there, still breathing. I knew, I went on, that I could drift away into the dark, and I chose to fight it, to hold on for a bit longer. Yet I knew if I wanted, I could have faded, and maybe it would be a new world, a realm of rest and peace. But I wasn't ready for it, not to go there alone. I knew there was something else waiting beyond that dark, something good. For a moment, those blue eyes flared brighter. Then the boy said,
"You know who has the cauldron, Rhysand, who has been pillaging the temples. You only came here to confirm what you have long guessed."
"The King of Hybern." Dread sluiced through my veins and pooled in my stomach. I shouldn't have been surprised, should have known, but... The carver said nothing more, waiting for another truth, so I offered up another shattered piece of me. When Amarantha made me kill those two fairies, if the third hadn't been Tamlin, I would have put the dagger in my own heart at the end. Rhys went still. I knew there was no coming back from what I'd done, I said, wondering if the blue flame in the carver's eyes might burn my ruined soul to ash. And once I broke their curse, once I knew I'd saved them, I just wanted enough time to turn that dagger on myself. I only decided I wanted to live when she killed me, and I knew I had not finished whatever it was I'd been born to do. I dared a glance at Rhys, and there was something like devastation on his beautiful face. It was gone in a blink. Even the bone carver said gently,
"With the cauldron, you could do other things than raise the dead. You could shatter the wall."
The only thing keeping human lands, my family, safe from not just Hybern, but any other fairies.
It is likely that Hybern has been quiet for so many years because he was hunting the cauldron, learning its secrets. Resurrection of a specific individual might very well have been his first test once the feet were reunited, and now he finds that the cauldron is pure energy, pure power, and like any magic, it can be depleted. So he will let it rest, let it gather strength, learn its secrets to feed it more energy, more power.
"Is there a way to stop it?" I breathed. Silence. Expectant, waiting silence. Rhys's voice was hoarse as he said, "Don't offer him one more."
"When the cauldron was made," the carver interrupted, "its dark maker used the last of the molten ore to forge a book, the Book of Breathings. In it, written between the carved words, are the spells to negate the cauldron's power, or control it wholly. But after the war, it was split into two pieces. One went to the Fae, one to the 6 human queens. It was part of the treaty, purely symbolic, as the cauldron had been lost for millennia and considered mere myth. The book was believed harmless, because like calls to like, and only that which was made can speak those spells and summon its power. No creature born of the earth may wield it, so the High Lords and humans dismissed it as little more than a historical heirloom. But if the book were in the hands of something reforged, you would have to test such a theory, of course, but it might be possible." His eyes narrowed to amused slits as I realized. "So, now the High Lord of Summer possesses our piece, and the reigning mortal queens have the other entombed in their shining palace by the sea. Prythian's half is guarded, protected with blood spells keyed to Summer himself. The one belonging to the mortal queens, they were crafty when they received their gift. They used our own kind to spell the book, to bind it, so that if it were ever stolen, if, let's say, a High Lord were to winnow into their castle to steal it, the book would melt into ore and be lost. It must be freely given by a mortal queen, with no trickery, no magic involved." A little laugh. "Such clever, lovely creatures, humans." The carver seemed lost in ancient memory, then shook his head. Reunite both halves of the Book of Breathings, and you will be able to nullify the powers of the cauldron, hopefully before it returns to full strength and shatters that wall.
I didn't bother saying thank you, not with the information he'd told us, not when I'd been forced to say those things, and could still feel Rhys's lingering attention, as if he'd suspected, but never believed just how badly I'd broken in that moment with Amarantha. We turned away, his hand sliding from my back to grip my hand. The touch was light, gentle, and I suddenly had no strength to even grip it back. The carver picked up the bone Rhysand had brought him and weighed it in those child's hands.
I shall carve your death in here, Feyre.
Up and up into the darkness we walked, through the sleeping stone and the monsters who dwelled within it. At last I said to Rhys, "What did you see?" "You first." A boy, around 8, dark-haired and blue-eyed. Rhys shuddered, the most human gesture I'd seen him make. "What did you see?" I pushed. "Jurian," Rhys said. "He appeared exactly as Jurian looked the last time I saw him, facing Amarantha when they fought to the death." I didn't want to learn how the bone carver knew who we'd come to ask about. Chapter 19. "Amren's right," Rhys drawled, leaning against the threshold of the townhouse sitting room. "You are like dogs, waiting for me to come home. Maybe I should buy treats." Cassian gave him a vulgar gesture from where he lounged on the couch before the hearth, an arm slung over the back behind Moore. Though everything about his powerful, muscled body suggested someone at ease, there was a tightness in his jaw, a coiled-up energy that told me they'd been waiting here for a while. Asriel lingered by the window, comfortably ensconced in shadows, a light flurry of snow dusting the lawn and street behind him. And Amren, nowhere to be seen. I couldn't tell if I was relieved or not. I'd have to hunt her down to give her back the necklace soon, if Rhys's warnings and her own words were to be believed. Damp and cold from the mist and wind that chased us down from the prison, I strode for the armchair across the couch, which had been shaped, like so much of the furniture here, to accommodate Illyrian wings. I stretched my stiff limbs toward the fire and stifled a groan at the delicious heat. "How'd it go?" Moore said, straightening beside Cassian. "No gown today, just practical black pants and a thick blue sweater." "The bone carver," Rhys said, "is a busybody gossip who likes to pry into other people's business far too much." "But," Cassian demanded, bracing his arms on his knees, wings tucked in tight. "But," Rhys said, "he can also be helpful when he chooses. And it seems we need to start doing what we do best." I flexed my numbed fingers, content to let them discuss, needing a moment to reel myself back in, to shut out what I'd revealed to the bone carver, and what the bone carver suggested I might actually be asked to do with that book, the abilities I might have. So Rhys told them of the cauldron and the reason behind the temple pillagings, to no shortage of swearing and questions, and revealed nothing of what I had admitted in exchange for the information. Asriel emerged from his wreathing shadows to ask the most questions. His face and voice remained unreadable. Cassian, surprisingly, kept quiet, as if the general understood that the shadow singer would know what information was necessary, and was busy assessing it for his own forces. When Rhys was done, his spymaster said, "I'll contact my sources in the Summer Court about where the half of the Book of Breathings is hidden. I can fly into the human world myself to figure out where they're keeping their part of the book, before we ask them for it." "No need," Rhys said, "and I don't trust this information, even with your sources, with anyone outside of this room, save for Amren." "They can be trusted," Asriel said with quiet steel, his scarred hands clenching at his leather-clad sides. "We're not taking risks where this is concerned," Rhys merely said. He held Asriel's stare, and I could almost hear the silent words Rhys added. "It is no judgment or reflection on you, Az. Not at all." But Asriel yielded no tinge of emotion as he nodded, his hands unfurling. "So, what do you have planned?" Moore cut in, perhaps for Az's sake. Rhys picked an invisible piece of dirt off his fighting leathers. When he lifted his head, those violet eyes were glacial. The King of Hybern sacked one of our temples to get a missing piece of the cauldron. As far as I'm concerned, it's an act of war, an indication that His Majesty has no interest in wooing me. He likely remembers our allegiance to the humans in the war anyway, Cassian said. He wouldn't jeopardize revealing his plans while trying to sway you. And I bet some of Amarantha's cronies reported to him about Under the Mountain. About how it all ended, I mean. Cassian's throat bobbed. When Rhys had tried to kill her. I lowered my hands from the fire. Rhys said, "Indeed. But this means Hybern's forces have already successfully infiltrated our lands, without detection. I plan to return the favor." Mother above. Cassian and Moore just grinned with feral delight. "How?" Moore asked. Rhys crossed his arms. "It will require careful planning, but if the cauldron is in Hybern, then to Hybern we must go, either to take it back or use the book to nullify it." Some cowardly, pathetic part of me was already trembling. "Hybern likely has as many wards and shields around it as we have here," Azriel countered. "We'd need to find a way to get through them undetected first." A slight nod. "Which is why we start now, while we hunt for the book. So when we get both halves, we can move swiftly, before word can spread that we even possess it." Cassian nodded, but asked, "How are you going to retrieve the book, then?" I braced myself as Rhys said, "Since these objects are spelled to the individual High Lords, and can only be found by them through their power. Then, in addition to her uses regarding the handling of the Book of Breathings itself, it seems we possibly have our own detector." Now they all looked at me. I cringed. "Perhaps," was what the bone carver said in regard to me being able to track things. "You don't know." My words faded as Rhys smirked. "You have a kernel of all our power, like having 7 thumbprints. If we've hidden something, if we've made or protected it with our power, no matter where it has been concealed, you will be able to track it through that very magic." "You can't know that for sure," I tried again. "No, but there is a way to test it." Rhys was still smiling. "Here we go," Cassian grumbled. Moore gave Azriel a warning glare to tell him not to volunteer this time. The spymaster just gave her an incredulous look in return. I might have lounged in my chair to watch their battle of wills, had Rhys not said, "With your abilities, Feyre, you might be able to find the half of the book at the summer court and break the wards around it. But I'm not going to take the carver's word for it, or bring you there without testing you first. To make sure that when it counts, when we need to get that book, we do not fail. So we're going on another little trip, to see if you can find a valuable object of mine that I've been missing for a considerably long time." "Shit," Moore said, plunging her hands into the thick folds of her sweater. "Where?" I managed to say. It was Azriel who answered. "To the Weaver." Rhys held up a hand as Cassian opened his mouth. "The test," he said, "will be to see if Feyre can identify the object of mine in the Weaver's trove. When we get to the summer court, Tarquin might have spelled his half of the book to look different, feel different." "By the cauldron, Rhys," Moore snapped, setting both feet on the carpet. "Are you out of your—" "Who is the Weaver?" I pushed. "An ancient, wicked creature," Azriel said, and I surveyed the faint scars on his wings, his neck, and wondered how many such things he'd encountered in his immortal life, if they were any worse than the people who shared blood ties with him. "Who should remain unbothered," he added in Rhys's direction. "Find another way to test her abilities." Rhys merely shrugged and looked to me, to let me choose. Always. It was always my choice with him these days. Yet he hadn't let me go back to the spring court during those 2 visits, because he knew how badly I needed to get away from it. I gnawed on my lower lip, weighing the risks, waiting to feel any kernel of fear, of emotion, but this afternoon had drained any reserve of such things. The bone carver, the weaver, Can't you ever just call someone by a given name? Cassian chuckled, and Moore settled back in the sofa cushions. Only Rhys, it seemed, understood that it hadn't entirely been a joke. His face was tight, like he knew precisely how tired I was, how I knew I should be quaking at the thought of this weaver, but after the bone carver, what I'd revealed to it, I could feel nothing at all. Rhys said to me, "What about adding one more name to that list?" I didn't particularly like the sound of that. Moore said as much. "Emissary," Rhysand said, ignoring his cousin. "Emissary to the Night Court, for the human realm." Asriel said, "There hasn't been one for 500 years, Rhys." "There also hasn't been a human turned immortal since then either." Rhys met my gaze. "The human world must be as prepared as we are, especially if the King of Hybern plans to shatter the wall and unleash his forces upon them. We need the other half of the book from those mortal queens, and if we can't use magic to influence them, then they're going to have to bring it to us." More silence. On the street beyond the bay of windows, wisps of snow brushed past, dusting the cobblestones. Rhys jerked his chin at me. "You are an immortal fairy, with a human heart. Even as such, you might very well set foot on the continent and be hunted for it. So we set up a base in neutral territory, in a place where humans trust us, trust you, Feyre, and where other humans might risk going to meet you, to hear the voice of Prythian after 5 centuries. "My family's estate," I said. "Mother's tits, Rhys," Cassian cut in, wings flaring wide enough to nearly knock over the ceramic vase on the side table next to him. "You think we can just take over her family's house, demand that of them?" Nesta hadn't wanted any dealings with the Fae, and Elaine was so gentle, so sweet. How could I bring them into this? "The land," Moore said, reaching over to return the vase to its place, "will run red with blood, Cassian, regardless of what we do with her family. It is now a matter of where that blood will flow, and how much will spill. How much human blood we can save." And maybe it made me a cowardly fool, but I said, "The spring court borders the wall." "The wall that stretches across the sea. We'll fly in offshore," Rhys said without so much as a blink. "I won't risk discovery from any court, though word might spread quickly enough once we're there. I know it won't be easy, Feyre, but if there's any way you could convince those queens—" "I'll do it," I said. Claire Better's broken and nailed body flashed in my vision. Amarantha had been one of his commanders, just one of many. The King of Hybern had to be horrible beyond reckoning to be her master. If these people got their hands on my sisters, they might not be happy about it, but I'll make Elaine and Nesta do it. I didn't have the nerve to ask Rhys if he could simply force my family to agree to help us if they refused. I wonder if his powers would work on Nesta, when even Tamlin's glamour had failed against her steel mind. "Then it's settled," Rhys said. None of them looked particularly happy. "Once Feyre Darling returns from the Weaver, we'll bring Hybern to its knees." Rhys and the others were gone that night. Where, no one told me. But after the events of the day, I barely finished devouring the food Nuala and Caradwyn brought to my room before I tumbled into sleep. I dreamed of a long, white bone, carved with horrifying accuracy, my face twisted in agony and despair, the ash knife in my hand, a pool of blood leaking away from 2 corpses. But I awoke to the watery light of winter dawn, my stomach full from the night before. A mere minute after I'd risen to consciousness, Rhys knocked on my door. I'd barely granted him permission to enter before he stalked inside like a midnight wind and chucked a belt hung with knives onto the floor of the bed. "Hurry," he said, flinging open the doors of the armoire and yanking out my fighting leathers. He tossed them onto the bed, too. "I want to be gone before the sun is fully up." "Why?" I said, pushing back the covers. "No wings today." "Because time is of the essence." He dug out my socks and boots. "Once the King of Hybern realizes that someone is searching for the Book of Breathings to nullify the powers of the cauldron, then his agents will begin hunting for it too." "You suspected this for a while, though." I hadn't had the chance to discuss it with him last night. The cauldron, the king, the book. You wanted it confirmed, but you were waiting for me. Had you agreed to work with me 2 months ago, I would have taken you right to the bone carver to see if he confirmed my suspicions about your talents. But things didn't go as planned. No, they most certainly hadn't. The reading, I said, sliding my feet into fleece-lined, thick-soled slippers. That's why you insisted on the lessons. So if your suspicions were true and I could harness the book, I could actually read it, or any translation of whatever is inside. A book that old might very well be written in an entirely different language, a different alphabet. Again, he said, now striding for the dresser. Had you started to work with me, I would have told you why. I couldn't risk discovery otherwise. He paused with a hand on the knob. You should have learned to read no matter what. But yes, when I told you it served my own purposes, it was because of this. Do you blame me for it? No, I said, and meant it. But I'd prefer to be notified of any future schemes. Duly noted. Rhys yanked open the drawers and pulled out my undergarments. He dangled the bits of midnight lace and chuckled. I'm surprised you didn't demand Nuala and Caradwyn buy you something else. I stalked to him, snatching the lace away. You're drooling on the carpet. I slammed the bathing room door before he could respond. He was waiting as I emerged, already warm within the fur-lined leather. He held up the belt of knives, and I studied the loops and straps. No swords, no bow or arrows, he said. He'd worn his own Illyrian fighting leathers, that simple, brutal sword strapped down his spine. But knives are fine? Rhys knelt and spread wide the web of leather and steel, beckoning for me to stick a leg through one loop. I did as instructed, ignoring the brush of his steady hands on my thighs, as I stepped through the other loop, and he began tightening and buckling things. She will not notice a knife, as she has knives in her cottage for eating and her work. But things that are out of place, objects that might not have been there, a sword, a bow and arrow, she might sense those things. What about me? He tightened a strap. Strong, capable hands, so at odds with the finery he usually wore to dazzle the rest of the world into thinking he was something else entirely. Do not make a sound. Do not touch anything but the object she took from me. Rhys looked up, hands braced on my thighs. Bow, he'd once ordered Tamlin, and now here he was, on his knees before me. His eyes glinted as if he remembered it too. Had that been a part of his game, that facade, or had it been vengeance for the horrible blood feud between them? If we're correct about your powers, he said, if the bone carver wasn't lying to us, then you and the object will have the same imprint, thanks to the preserving spells I placed on it long ago. You are one and the same. She will not notice your presence so long as you touch only it. You will be invisible to her. She's blind? A nod, but her other senses are lethal, so be quick and quiet. Find the object and run out, Feyre. His hands lingered on my legs, wrapping around the back of them. And if she notices me? His hands tightened slightly. Then we'll learn precisely how skilled you are. Cruel, conniving bastard. I glared at him. Rhys shrugged. Would you rather I locked you in the House of Wind and stuffed you with food and made you wear fine clothes and plan my parties? Go to hell. Why not get this object yourself if it's so important? Because the Weaver knows me, and if I am caught, there would be a steep price. High Lords are not to interfere with her, no matter the direness of the situation. There are many treasures in her hoard, some she has kept for millennia. Most will never be retrieved, because the High Lords do not dare be caught, thanks to the laws that protect her, thanks to her wrath. Any thieves on their behalf, either they do not return, or they are never sent, for fear of it leading back to their High Lord. But you, she does not know you. You belong to every court. So I'm your huntress and thief? His hands slid down to cup the backs of my knees, as he said with a roguish grin, You are my salvation, Feyre. Chapter 20. Rhysand winnowed us into a wood that was older, more aware than any place I'd been. The gnarled beech trees were tightly woven together, splattered and draped so thoroughly with moss and lichen that it was nearly impossible to see the bark beneath. "Where are we?" I breathed, hardly daring to whisper. Rhys kept his hands within casual reach of his weapons. "In the heart of Prythian, there is a large empty territory that divides the north and south. At the center of it is our sacred mountain." My heart stumbled, and I focused on my steps through the ferns and moss and roots. "This forest," Rhys went on, "is on the eastern edge of that neutral territory. Here, there is no High Lord. Here, the law is made by who is strongest, meanest, most cunning. And the weaver of the wood is at the top of their food chain." The trees groaned, though there was no breeze to shift them. No, the air here was tight and stale. "Amarantha didn't wipe them out?" "Amarantha was no fool," Rhys said, his face dark. "She did not touch these creatures or disturb the wood. For years, I tried to find ways to manipulate her to make that foolish mistake, but she never bought it. And now we're disturbing her, for a mere test." He chuckled, the sound bouncing off the gray stones strewn across the forest floor like scattered marbles. "Cassian tried to convince me last night not to take you. I thought he might even punch me." "Why? I barely knew him." "Who knows? With Cassian, he's probably more interested in fucking you than protecting you." "You're a pig." "You could, you know," Rhys said, holding up the branch of a scrawny beech for me to slip under. "If you needed to move on in a physical sense, I'm sure Cassian would be more than happy to oblige." It felt like a test in itself, and it pissed me off enough that I crooned, "Then tell him to come to my room tonight." "If you survive this test." I paused atop a little lichen-crusted rock. "You seem pleased by the idea that I won't." "Quite the opposite, Feyre." He prowled to where I stood on the stone. I was almost eye level with him. The forest went even quieter, the trees seeming to lean closer, as if to catch every word. "I'll let Cassian know you're open to his advances." "Good," I said. A bit of hollowed-out air pushed against me, like a flicker of night. That power along my bones and blood stirred in answer. I made to jump off the stone, but he gripped my chin, the movement too fast to detect. His words were a lethal caress as he said, "Did you enjoy the sight of me kneeling before you?" I knew he could hear my heart as it ratcheted into a thunderous beat. I gave him a hateful little smirk anyway, yanking my chin out of his touch and leaping off the stone. I might have aimed for his feet, and he might have shifted out of the way just enough to avoid it. Isn't that all you males are good for anyway? But the words were tight, near breathless. His answering smile evoked silken sheets and jasmine-scented breezes at midnight. A dangerous line, one Rhys was forcing me to walk to keep me from thinking about what I was about to face, about what a wreck I was inside. Anger, this flirtation, annoyance. He knew those were my crutches. What I was about to encounter then must be truly harrowing if he wanted me going in there mad, thinking about sex, about anything but the weaver of the wood. "Nice try," I said hoarsely. Rhysand just shrugged and swaggered off into the trees ahead. Bastard. Yes, it had been to distract me, but... I stormed after him as silently as I could, intent on tackling him and slamming my fist into his spine. But he held up a hand as he stopped before a clearing. A small, whitewashed cottage with a thatched roof and half-crumbling chimney sat in the center. Ordinary, almost mortal. There was even a well, its bucket perched on the stone lip, and a woodpile beneath one of the round windows of the cottage. No sound or light within, not even smoke puffed from the chimney. The few birds in the forest fell quiet, not entirely, but to keep their chatter to a minimum, and there, faint, coming from inside the cottage, was a pretty, steady humming. It might have been the sort of place I would have stopped if I were thirsty or hungry or in need of shelter for the night. Maybe that was the trap. The trees around the clearing, so close that their branches nearly clawed at the thatched roof, might very well have been the bars of a cage. Rhys inclined his head toward the cottage, bowing with dramatic grace. In, out, don't make a sound. Find whatever object it was and snatch it from beneath a blind person's nose, and then run like hell. Mossy earth paved the way to the front door, already cracked slightly. A bit of cheese, and I was the foolish mouse about to fall for it. Eyes twinkling, Rhys mouthed, "Good luck." I gave him a vulgar gesture, and slowly, silently, made my way toward the front door. The woods seemed to monitor each of my steps. When I glanced behind, Rhys was gone. He hadn't said if he'd interfere if I were in mortal peril. I probably should have asked. I avoided any leaves and stones, falling into a pattern of movement that some part of my body, some part that was not born of the High Lords, remembered. Like waking up. That's what it felt like. I passed the well. Not a speck of dirt, not a stone out of place. A perfect, pretty trap, that mortal part of me warned. A trap designed from a time when humans were prey, now laid for a smarter, immortal sort of game. I was not prey any longer, I decided as I eased up to that door. And I was not a mouse. I was a wolf. I listened on the threshold, the rock worn as if many, many boots had passed through, and perhaps never passed back over again. The words of her song became clear now, her voice sweet and beautiful, like sunlight on a stream. There were two sisters, they went playing, to see their father's ships come sailing. And when they came unto the sea brim, the elder did push the younger in. A honeyed voice, for an ancient, horrible song. I'd heard it before, slightly different, but sung by humans who had no idea that it had come from fairy throats. I listened for another moment, trying to hear anyone else, but there was only a clatter and thrum of some sort of device, and the weaver's song. Sometimes she sank, and sometimes she swam, till her corpse came to the miller's dam. My breath was tight in my chest, but I kept it even, directing it through my mouth in silent breaths. I eased open the front door, just an inch. No squeak, no whine of rusty hinges. Another piece of the pretty trap, practically inviting thieves in. I peered inside when the door had opened wide enough. A large main room, with a small shut door in the back. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, crammed with bric-a-brac. Books, shells, dolls, herbs, pottery, shoes, crystals, more books, jewels. From the ceiling and wood rafters hung all manner of chains. Dead birds, dresses, ribbons, gnarled bits of wood, strands of pearls. A junk shop of some sort of immortal hoarder. And that hoarder? In the gloom of the cottage, there sat a large spinning wheel, cracked and dulled with age. And before that ancient spinning wheel, her back to me, sat the weaver. Her thick hair was of richest onyx, tumbling down to her slender waist as she worked the wheel, snow-white hands feeding and pulling the thread around a thorn-sharp spindle. She looked young, her gray gown simple but elegant, sparkling faintly in the dim forest light through the windows, as she sang in a voice of glittering gold. But what did he do with her breastbone? He made him a viol to play on. What did he do with her fingers so small? He made pegs to his viol withal. The fiber she fed into the wheel was white, soft, like wool, but I knew, in that lingering human part of me, it was not wool. I knew that I did not want to learn what creature it had come from, who she was spinning into thread. Because on the shelf directly beyond her were cones upon cones of threads, of every color and texture, and on the shelf adjacent to her were swaths and yards of that woven thread. Woven, I realized, on the massive loom nearly hidden in the darkness near the hearth, the weaver's loom. I had come on spinning day. Would she have been singing if I had come on weaving day instead? From the strange, fear-drenched scent that came from those bolts of fabric, I already knew the answer. A wolf. I was a wolf. I stepped into the cottage, careful of the scattered debris on the earthen floor. She kept working, the wheel clattering so merrily, so at odds with her horrible song.
And what did he do with her nose ridge? Unto his vial he made a bridge. What did he do with her veins so blue? He made strings to his vial thereto.
I scanned the room, trying not to listen to the lyrics. Nothing. I felt nothing that might pull me toward one object in particular. Perhaps it would be a blessing if I were indeed not the one to track the book, if today was not the start of what was sure to be a slew of miseries. The weaver perched there, working. I scanned the shelves, the ceiling. Borrowed time. I was on borrowed time, and I was almost out of it. Had Rhys sent me on a fool's errand? Maybe there was nothing here. Maybe this object had been taken. It would be just like him to do that, to tease me in the woods, to see what sort of things might make my body react. And maybe I resented Tamlin enough in that moment to enjoy that deadly bit of flirtation. Maybe I was as much a monster as the female spinning before me. But if I was a monster, then I supposed Rhys was as well. Rhys and I were one and the same, beyond the power that he'd given me. It'd be fitting if Tamlin hated me too, once he realized I'd truly left. I felt it then, like a tap on my shoulder. I pivoted, keeping one eye on the weaver and the other on the room as I wove through the maze of tables and junk. Like a beacon, a bit of light laced with his half-smile, it tugged me. "Hello," it seemed to say. "Have you come to claim me at last?" Yes, I wanted to say, even as part of me wished it were otherwise. The weaver sang behind me.
What did he do with her eyes so bright? On his vial he set it first light. What did he do with her tongue so rough? 'Twas the new till, and it spoke enough.
I followed that pulse, toward the shelf lining the wall beside the hearth. Nothing, and nothing on the second, but the third, right above my eyeline. There. I could almost smell his salt and citrus scent. The bone carver had been correct. I rose on my toes to examine the shelf. An old letter knife, books in leather that I did not want to touch or smell, a handful of acorns, a tarnished crown of ruby and jasper, and a ring. A ring of twisted strands of gold and silver, flecked with pearl, and set with a stone of deepest solid blue. Sapphire, but different. I'd never seen a sapphire like that, even at my father's offices. This one. I could have sworn that in the pale light, the lines of a six-pointed star radiated across the round, opaque surface. Rhys. This had Rhys written all over it. He'd sent me here for a ring? The weaver sang, "Then bespake the treble string, oh, yonder is my father the king." I watched her for another heartbeat, gauging the distance between the shelf and the open door. Grab the ring, and I could be gone in a heartbeat, quick, quiet, calm.
"Then bespake the second string, oh, yonder sits my mother the queen."
I dropped a hand toward one of the knives strapped to my thighs. When I got back to Rhys, maybe I'd stab him in the gut. That fast, the memory of phantom blood covered my hands. I knew how it'd feel to slide my dagger through his skin and bones and flesh, knew how the blood would dribble out, how he'd groan in pain. I shut out the thought, even as I could feel the blood of those fairies soaking that human part of me that hadn't died and belonged to no one but my miserable self.
"Then bespake the strings all three, yonder is my sister that drowned me."
My hand was quiet as a final dying breath as I plucked the ring from the shelf. The weaver stopped singing. Chapter 21. I froze, the ring now in the pocket of my jacket. She'd finished the last song. Maybe she'd start another. Maybe. The spinning wheel slowed. I backed a step toward the door, then another. Slower and slower, each rotation of the ancient wheel longer than the last. Only 10 steps to the door. 5. The wheel went round, one last time, so slow I could see each of the spokes. 2. I turned for the door as she lashed out with a white hand, gripping the wheel and stopping it wholly. The door before me snicked shut. I lunged for the handle, but there was none. Window. Get to the window.
"Who is in my house?" she said softly.
Fear, undiluted, unbroken fear, slammed into me, and I remembered. I remembered what it was to be human and helpless and weak. I remembered what it was to